Hi everyone. Let's start with the very first chapter that we have in our double A syllabus, which is or assurance. What is assurance? What is assurance engagements? What are different types of assurance engagements? This is what we are going to study in this particular chapter. So I have already given you an overview in the live session that we had in regards to what is audit and a little bit about what all is the background regarding audit and why do we do audit, what actually is audit in layman language. So in today's video we are going to talk about everything in relation to chapter number 1, and we're going to understand in detail as to what do we understand, what do we mean by assurance engagement, all of these terminologies. So let's begin with the very first topic that we have in our syllabus, which is assurance. What is assurance? Now, here I have written a very detailed definition. This is the exact definition which is there in your study texts. But we are going to break it down into a simpler language so that we understand this word in a very clear manner, and we're not just rote learning them. Because in audit, I personally believe that apart from your knowledge based questions, which you are of course going to discuss, nothing should be rote learned. You should understand each and every topic very very nicely with good examples which you can of course relate in the future as well while you are probably doing your exam, etc. So let's start by understanding what is assurance. All right, I'll first introduce you to a very simple example, and then probably I'll explain you the definition, the bifurcation of the definition as well. All right, so now think of you as a real life example. Think of that you are a person, all right, and now you have earned enough. Now you were thinking that, oh my, I have gotten enough funds with me, let me buy a car for myself because it will be easier for me to travel to my work, for my studies. Also, if I want to go out also, I can use the car, right? But because you are still a student and you are sponsoring your studies, etc., so you think that I don't have funds to take a new car, for example. So new car is out of the picture, right? So you get sad a little bit and think that, oh my god, I cannot buy a car because I probably do not have the enough funds for that, for example, right? Now what you talk about this thing to your one of your friends, for example, right? And he suggests you that why not go for a second hand car. Nowadays everybody is about upcycling and sustainability, all of those things. So why not go ahead with a second hand car? It is also a good option, and it will fit in your budget also. You will have the funds also, and you can use it for your benefit as well, right? So you think, yes, he is telling something which is good, and probably I should look out at least for a second hand car. So what you go, you say, okay, let me go to a showroom. So now you visit a showroom, and the showroom guy shows you multiple different cars, and one of the car you actually like a lot, right? So now you ask him about the specifications, about how much kilometers has it run, and how old is the car, are there any damages to the car, etc. You ask all of these information because it is a second hand car, right? Now the showroom guy has provided you all of the information, right? Now showroom guy is a third party to you. He's not your friend, he's not your family. How can you trust him? Can you trust him? No, of course, for once you can trust your this friend, but you cannot trust the showroom guy, right? So and you are investing supposedly 8 lakh rupees in that car. I'm not, guys, don't judge me, I'm not really good at the funds, at the car prices. I'm just giving you a random number, which is 8 lakh INR for a second hand car. All right, so supposingly now, because of course you want to mindfully invest your money, and because you cannot trust a third party showroom guy, so what you do, you go to your friend. You say, hey, listen, I went to the showroom and I found a guy. He told me everything about the car. I like the car, but how can I be sure that he's telling me the truth? In the sense that he's telling the truth in the sense that the condition of the car is absolutely good. How do you think so? Right? Then your friend says, wait, listen, what you can do is you can go to a car mechanic. You can go to a car mechanic and ask him and tell him to review the car or check the car or see if the engine is fine, if the kilometers are okay, if the inner condition of the car is okay, and XYZ. things are okay for your running and you can purchase the car. So you say, yes, you are a great guy, you are giving me such good ideas. You go to the car mechanic, you ask him that, hey, listen, I want to buy the second hand car, can you please check if the car is okay for me or no? The car guy says absolutely yes. So you both go to the showroom. He inspects the car. He checks the engine, he checks the machinery, he checks the kilometers, he checks the inner windows and all of the seats, etc. And then he gives you a clear check that yes, you are good to go. The car mechanic, whatever he told you is absolutely okay, right? Then you get a certain level of satisfaction that yes, the person who told me that the he can be trusted, right? Whatever he told me is actually true. So in those cases, in that case, the car mechanic has actually given you a satisfaction, has given you an assurance that yes, the car is working fine, because you can trust the person because he is a professional in that field, he knows everything about it, and he does not have any self interest over here, right? If he tells the car is in bad condition, he's not losing out anything. If he tells it is a good condition, he's not losing out on anything. So there's no biasness over here, right? He is doing just to probably because you have paid him paid or probably he's a friend of your friend, so probably he's just helping you out. So but because he is a professional, because he's a third party, because he's unbiased, so that is the reason you can trust him, right? So this is what is known as assurance. Another example, let's take another example. Okay. Another example, let's take an example of your, I have actually made a very simple example also. This was also simple, but you'll also understand from that example. Now, supposingly you are in your school, all right, in 11th or 12th, supposedly you are in your 12th and your board are arising, and your marks, you are the child, and your marks have not been that great in the semester, the exams, the midterm exams or whatever, and your mom and dad are really worried that what how you'll be performing in your boards and what will happen, etc., right? So now what you do is, now your mother actually, she reaches out to a tutor. She says ki, can you, so what she does is she teaches you, she does for everything for you, but she reaches out to a tutor and says that, hey, can you please mark her assignments or her test papers, can you please do that, because then I will get a surety that she is working fine. So your tutor is going to mark you that, okay, this answer is wrong, this answer is wrong, this is correct, this is correct, and you have gotten, for example, 60 out of 100, for example, right? And you show it to your mother and you tell that these are the improvements that she can do probably, etc. So here your mother is getting assurance from the tutor that yes, she or he is working in correct direction, or she or he is not working in correct direction, right? So that is again a level of assurance, a level of satisfaction that your parent is getting from the tutor, right? So now let's associate our car mechanic example, our tutor example, to our assurance definition. All right. Okay. So what is assurance? What they do is, what is assurance? An assurance engagement is an engagement in which a practitioner, so now there is first party who is a practitioner, obtains sufficient appropriate evidence. This is again a very important word. I will tell you the meaning of this word as well. In order to express a conclusion designed to enhance the degree of confidence of the intended users. Intended users is the second party, other than the responsible party, about the outcome of the evaluation or the measurement of the subject matter against a criteria. All right, so let me show you. Now we have read the definition once, but how are we going to understand is when we see the elements of it. So I have here broken down these elements into 5 different things. So if you go back to the definition, you will see that the definition is made up of these 5 points, right? So this is very, very important. Let's first understand, then I'll tell you how it is tested in the exam, right? So it's saying 5 elements. So I told you there are 3 party involvement. I told you I marked practitioner, I marked intended user, I marked responsible party. So 3 people are there in the in the picture. Similarly, in our car guy example, in the car mechanic example, you were there, your car mechanic was there, and showroom guy was there. In first example. In second example, you were there, your tutor was there, and your mother, for example, was there. Right? So now, practitioner is basically the auditor. Practitioner is the auditor. Auditor basically, what is the auditor doing? Is giving the assurance. So here in the example, our car mechanic was the auditor because he was actually checking the car. In this example, our tutor is the auditor. She is checking if your mocks, if your assignments, if your test is good or no. Similarly, in this example, our car mechanic was checking if the car was working fine or no, or if the car's condition was fine or no, right? So this is your practitioner. Practitioner is your auditor. Auditor is the one who checks and assures you that yes, everything is fine for me, right? That's first thing. He is a professional. He is the person who is unbiased, right? Second, intended users. Intended users are basically you who wants to get the assurance, who wants to get the assurance. So you are the intended user in this particular case, right? So in this particular case, your mother is the intended user because she wants to know if you are working fine or no, right? In this showroom guy, in this car mechanic thing, you wanted to know if the car is working fine or no. So intended users are basically those for whom the auditor is performing a particular task, right? Which is your shareholders, right? I will explain you for which you need it, right? For now, just compare the example, just understand who are these people in our example, right? Responsible party. Now, responsible party is the party who is responsible for making the particular item. For example, in this case, our showroom guy was the responsible party. He was responsible for telling me that this car is good, this car is bad, or this is what the condition of the car is. In this case, you are the responsible party because you actually wrote the answer. You wrote the test. So tutor, who is the auditor, is checking your test, seeing and telling your mother that yes, assurance can be placed, she is working fine, she is working good, right? So in real life scenario, what happens? You people all would have studied agency theory in your lower level classes, right? So I'll also, I think I have a slide for the same. Yeah. So basically, agency relationship is, what do we understand by agency relationship? Is basically there are three parties. One is three, one, two, and three. Three parties. One is the auditor, one is your shareholders, and one is your directors or management, right? And you people know that what is the sole aim, sole reason, sole agenda of the directors is to increase the wealth of shareholders, right? Now think of it as a big company, think of it as a Reliance, right? Or let's suppose take a small example. Let's suppose take example of XYZ, then we'll move to Reliance also. Okay. Supposingly you have your management over here. Now you people know that, if I am investing in a particular company, I can, because I am an investor, for example, and I cannot actually, supposing, okay, let's take another example. Okay, supposedly it was an XYZ company. CEO, supposedly let's take example of being assistant. Let's take being here. Okay. So I am the founder. Tushita is the founder. We two are founders right now. Right now it is a small company. So I don't need any, directors or management to handle everything. Me and Tushita are doing, we have a small team. We do it on our own, everything on our own right now because we're a small company. So right now we actually do not need, there's no agency relationship. First of all, because there is no agency relationship, that is the reason I don't need an auditor, because right now we're a small company. Now think of for a bigger company. Do you think that if being SSA has 1 lakh students per quarter, will me and Tushita be able to handle everything? Of course not. We are also humans. We cannot actually guide each and every student one by one, right? Because there are so many students and we'll just go mad, right? So what we do, we say, okay, let us take a back step and let us keep a management. So management are there is a head who is managing the enrollments, there's a marketing head, there's a finance head, there's a HR. Everybody has their own roles and they are actually running the company, and they are running the company for me. They're getting their salaries, they're getting their bonuses, but ultimately the profits I am getting, because it is my company, I am the founder, right? So do you think that in some companies it can happen that management become biased, and what they do is they do not work in favor of the me, they work in favor of themselves, and they are doing some kind of frauds, errors, some kind of fishy things are happening, due to which they are showing me as less of profits, and my wealth is not increasing, rather their salaries, their bonuses, their profits are increasing. This can happen, of course. Now I am somebody who cannot trust somebody like just like that. Of course, I cannot trust a management. I cannot trust a head like that. If he's telling me that the profit for the year was 10 rupees, supposingly, I cannot trust it was 10 rupees. I have to double check. Probably I will check the financial statements, I will check the profits, I will check the losses, I will check the assets, liabilities, etc. I will check everything, and then I'll get to know that whether the profit was 10 or no. Right? Now, this is where the auditor comes in place, because he is a third party. He is unbiased. He does not have anything in relation to the management or anything in relation to me. He is an external party, right? He is third person who is coming into the picture and checking the financial statements on my behalf, on shareholders behalf, on founders behalf, and he is telling me that everything what management is doing is absolutely perfect, or he's telling me that these are the misstatements or these are the frauds that the management is doing, right? So he acts as an agent for me in this relationship that I have between the shareholders and directors or management, right? So this is an agency theory, and that is the reason auditor is important, right? So that is what we just discussed over here. That auditor is the person who tells the shareholders that yes, the responsible party is doing correct. Similarly, your tutor is going to tell your mother that you are working perfectly. In this case, the your car mechanic will tell you that everything that the showroom guy has told you is absolutely fine. So when you're making your notes, I will tell you to make your own notes. I will be providing you these notes. I will be providing you the other revision notes. But guys, whenever we are writing something on our own with our own hands, we get more understanding of the same. So just write these two examples. ये दोनों example लिखो. Write these two examples and then compare this example with this three-party involvement. You'll understand it better. You'll be able to relate it better. Who is the auditor? Who is the intended user? Who is the shareholder? Who is the director? Who is the responsible party? You'll be able to relate better, right? Next element of it, this is the first element of my definition is done, right? Next element is appropriate subject matter. Now, what is the subject matter on what we are discussing? Basically, on which the auditor will provide you an assurance, will provide you that yes, this is working fine. So in this case, in this example, my car was a subject matter. In this case, my tests, my assignments, these were my subject matter, right? So in audit, when we are doing assurance or we're doing audit, we're doing review engagements, our financial statements of the company, right? Just like I told you right now that I will be reviewing the balance sheet, I will be reviewing the profit and loss account, the profits, the losses, assets, liabilities, all of these things. So these are financial statements. So auditor or the practitioner always has a appropriate subject matter, which is the financial statement. So in our example, it was car. In this example, it was tests and assignments that you are going to give it to the tutor. Well and good. Next point. Suitable criteria. Now, of course, whenever we see here also the car guy, supposing again one more example I can give you for the suitable criteria. So whenever you do blood reports, right? If you have seen blood reports of yourself, they always give you what is your reports in regards to sodium, calcium, all of those B12, vitamin D, etc. And what is a range? What should actually be there? Then you compare, catch it should be between 5 to 10. I am at 7, so I'm okay. If it is more than 10, I am not okay. So these are the comparison criteria, that what is good, what is bad, if I'm okay, if I'm not okay, right? Similarly, because auditor is also going to follow some rules, follow some regulations, some norms. So what is the suitable criteria against which they compare that the financial statements are working fine or no? If you people have done FR, you know that there are certain standards. So auditor will check, okay, the person is following IFRS 15, the person is following IAS 37, 36, following or no. If they are not following, it is a red flag, right? So that is what is meant by financial reporting framework, IFRS. So the criteria against which the auditor compares your financial statement is your financial reporting framework, IFRS, is your IAS, right? All right, so 3 points are done for the definition. Fourth point, sufficient appropriate evidence. All right, so now what this, I know that a lot of people can tend to get confused at what it is and all of those things. Again, here when the car mechanic was actually reviewing the car, they obtained sufficient appropriate evidence, meaning they obtained, supposedly he bought his machineries and he checked the engine Celsius or whatever engine matrices, right? So he checked, okay, this is working fine. Then he checked other pipelines. If are they working fine? They compared. Itna range hona chahiye. This is what is working. Then he checked the kilometers. How much kilometers has the car run? He checked the inner things, etc. So he was obtaining the evidence that okay, that this, because of this the engine is fine. Because of this the kilometers is fine. Because of this the interiors are fine. Right. Similarly, your tutor also. Your tutor obtained that okay, this answer I'm comparing to this. This is the evidence of your test, for example. It is working. It is absolutely, the answer is absolutely fine. So that is what is evidence. Basically, if I'm concluding something, if I'm saying you that your answers is absolutely correct, on what basis am I saying? So this is basically the basis. Evidence is basically our basis. Okay? On what basis am I telling that this is absolutely correct, right? Sufficient and appropriate, these two are separate words. Sufficient basically means quantity. I should have enough quantity, enough evidences to believe that a particular item is working fine. I cannot just say engine, if engine is fine, the whole car is fine. Of course not, that's not sufficient. But if I'm checking engine, I'm checking other matrix also, I'm checking the windows, I'm checking the interiors, I'm checking the kilometers, this is sufficient. There are quantity, there is large number of quantity of evidences that I have obtained, right? So sufficient basically refers to quantity of information in regards to a particular item. Appropriate basically means quality of the checking that you are doing. So if I take the example over here, your tutor is checking the answers. So quality means that she's actually reading each and every answer and seeing if there's any problems in those. If it is not appropriate, probably she's just checking it from above and she's just randomly scrolling down, or she's just randomly ticking and crossing. That's not quality. Quality is when she's actually deep diving into your answers, seeing the spelling errors, seeing the grammatical errors also, seeing the conceptual errors also, everything she's saying, that is appropriate, that is quality. So your evidence, your basis should be qualitative also, quantitative also. It should be sufficient also, it should be appropriate also. So I hope now this word is clear to you, because this word you're going to see a lot of times in the entire course of syllabus. All right. Last thing. Now, in this course, let's now, supposingly your tutor gives, supposingly you have appeared for 6 tests, right? You have appeared for 6 tests and 1 mock also, 1 final exam also, everything. So what she did, she made a report card of you. You people have seen your report cards in smaller classes in 11th and 12th colleges. I'm supposed, no, I don't think it's in colleges, but 11th and 12th and lower level classes, right? So you used to get a report card wherein you used to get everything that, okay, in English, this is the score in a science, then in SST, in Hindi, and other languages, and in co-curricular activities, how was the person in communication, spoken English, proficiency, all of these. Every matrix was basically there in the report card. Similar to that report card, the auditor also makes their own report card, which is known as, because it is auditors, so it is known as auditor's report. In that report, the auditor tells that, okay, I did these sampling, I did these, I got these evidences, these were the red flags, these were the green flags, I am okay. Then he actually issues an opinion that, in my opinion, in my scenario, everything looks okay to me. Or if everything is not okay, then he will tell that this is not okay. Similar to your classes also, your tutor, your school teachers used to say that she is working very good, brilliant, comments used to be given. Or if you are not working brilliantly, then she used to say do more hard work, so comment basically. Similarly, the auditor will also have a report which is known as auditor's report. We have a full-fledged chapter for this in the later part of the syllabus, but just understand, so that if right now only you understand these little smaller words, then it will be easier for you to understand the bigger topics also, right? So that is what, I hope that you've made notes. And this particular topic, which is elements of assurance engagement, this can come for a 5 marker in the exam as a knowledge based question. So what is knowledge based questions? These are the questions which you can actually learn, and you do not have to relate them to the case. All right, so you people know that, as we have already discussed, that there are two sections, section A and section B. So this can be a part of section B, not really A. It cannot come in OTQs, it can come in your section B. All right. Okay, so let's move to the definition now. Now I think you will be able to understand the definition clearly. Do not rote learn. As I mentioned, never ever rote learn. In my classes, you're not going to rote learn anything. You have to understand everything in detail. That is the reason I showed you the elements first, so that you understand the definition and don't have to rote learn anything. So now let me read again. You will be able to better relate now. An engagement in which a practitioner, who is the practitioner? My auditor is the practitioner. So auditor obtains, so he is the one who is obtaining all of the evidences, he is the one who is obtaining all of the bases, is obtaining sufficient, we know, quantity, appropriate, we know, quality, evidence, we know, in order to express a conclusion. As I said, in the auditor's report, in your report card, the auditor or your tutor will be having an opinion that yes, the person is good, no, the person is not good. That is a conclusion, that everything is fine, everything is not fine. Conclusion designed to enhance the degree of the confidence. So confidence, who will be having the confidence? My intended users. Like you had the confidence after your car mechanic told you that the car is fine. That similarly, the intended users or the shareholders will be having more confidence on the financial statements after a third party, which is the auditor, which is the practitioner, who is a qualified person, will tell them that yes, everything is working very, very good. All right. Confidence of the intended users, who's the shareholders. In our case, I was the intended user in case of the car, and my mother was the intended user in case of my tutor example, right? Other than the responsible party. So responsible party is the one who makes the financial statement. Shareholders make the management, the directors make the financial statements, right? And we are auditing those. So responsible party is the people who are actually getting audited. In this example, our showroom guy was the responsible party. In this example, I was the responsible party in the tutor example, who was writing the answers. Similarly, when we are when the auditor is reviewing the financial statements, my management or my director is actually the responsible party, because they are the ones who make the financial statements, right? Party about the outcome of the evaluation or measurement of the subject matter. So subject matter is my financial statements, or was my car, or basically the tests or the marks that I gave it to my tutor, right? Against the criteria. So criteria is your IFRSs, against which you compare if the answers are fine or no. So I hope now the definition of assurance the elements of assurance, agency theory, these three topics are clear to you, are crystal clear to you, because then only you'll be able to understand everything. I have written here example car mechanic, example tutor, student, and parent, right? All right. So now I also, because this is actually not part of the chapter if you go through your Kaplan study text, but I wanted to talk about the what is audit and the difference, because a lot of students tend to get confused and they think that assurance and audit is exactly the same and there's no difference, but there is a difference, and let's talk about that difference in the next video. All right, now let's try and understand what is audit and what is the difference between audit and assurance, which is again a very important area of your syllabus. And this is actually good for your conceptual knowledge, because you should have that, although of course this won't be asked anywhere probably, but then you should actually know the difference. What is the difference between audit and assurance when you're actually studying the paper, which whose name is audit and assurance, right? Okay, so till now we have understood what is assurance, right? It is giving us a surety, giving us a clarity if the third party is working fine or no, and we are okay with their workings or no, right? Now, what is audit? Audit basically means that, see, your assurance is an umbrella term. All right, let me show you a few examples of assurance. I think then you'll be able to understand better. All right, so these are your examples of assurance engagement. We got to know what is assurance engagement, right? So now these are the examples of assurance engagement that we actually have in place to be able to understand it better, right? So now, okay, I'll ask you people a question. Think of it. Of course, you cannot reply right now to me, but think for yourself that, do you think if there is a particular company, can it only provide one kind of service? If it is an XYZ company, do you think it will suffice if it only provides one kind of service? Do you think if Being SSA were there and we were only providing, for example, only the test fees, will we suffice in the future? Do you think that? I don't think so. Similarly, if it is like an audit firm, you people all know what is, or who are the audit firms. We know all the big fours: KPMG, Deloitte, PwC, EY. These four are the big audit firms. But do you think they only provide audit related services? Do you think that? Of course not. Think about it. Think about it. You can Google also. But these four, if I just stick to these big fours, they do not just provide audit of financial statements as one of their services. They have couple of different services which they provide. And I'm not talking about domains. I'm not talking about tax, consulting. I'm not talking about these. Within the audit only, they provide several other services, which is kind of like audit, but it's not actually audit. All right. So that is basically, so first one is our audit of financial statements. Now, audit of financial statements is a very, very intricate work, very, very detailed work. All right. In audit, we scrutinize everything. We scrutinize all of this. We do on sample basis. We check, we inspect, we review the financial statements. We check all of the documents, all of the evidences. We gather, we observe everything, every possible thing that we do in audit of financial statements. That is a very, very detailed work. All right. And just to add to this, if it is a listed entity, I hope that you know the meaning of listed. Listed basically means that listed on stock market. All right. It is a listed entity on stock exchange. It is compulsory for them to get the audit done. Why it is compulsory? Because, when it is a listed entity, the money of general public is also invested in that listed entity. So it becomes very important to follow all the compliances and the rules, regulations. So the government, so they want that, your company is getting audited and everything is fine in the eyes of for the public also, because it is important from public aspect also. It's not just like a partnership. It's not just like a private company. It is publicly owned company. Public also has invested so much amount of their money into the company. So it is the company's responsibility also to serve them right, to increase their wealth. And in some cases, some companies do frauds, all of these things. So that is the reason for listed entity, it is compulsory to get the audit of financial statements. For non-listed company, it's not compulsory to get it. It's not compulsory. If they want, they can. If they don't want, it's okay, because it non-listed is their own company. There's no public involved over here. Like being SSA is a partnership. We have no public money in our company, right? So it's not mandatory for us to do audit, like for a proper external audit, statutory audit, as we say. But if we want, we can do it. So that is on our own wish, right? So this is the first example of assurance, which is assurance is a bigger umbrella under which audit comes into the place. So when you do a very close scrutiny, very detailed scrutiny, that is what is known as audit. Second is review of financial statements. As the word suggests, review. So here you are just reviewing. This is like a smaller version. This is like a, let's suppose, say like a baby version of your audit. It is like a baby version of the audit, which is not again compulsory. If you want to do it, you can do it. In some cases, you just get your financial statements reviewed by somebody just to check if it is everything, if everything is working fine or no in the company, for the company, right? Supposingly you want to take like a loan, so you need to check if you meet the criteria of the loan or no. Or for example, again, the loan, if your profits are okay working for the loan, if you can actually, if for example the loan has a has the people say that you have to maintain a profit of 10,000 rupees. So you just get your financial statements reviewed just to check if everything is going fine or no. So that is like a review, which is not very detailed. It's not detailed at all. You just do a quick review of the financial statements to check if everything is working all right or no. That is the review. This is another example of assurance engagement. So because in assurance we're reviewing, this is a part of the review. Then the third one is systems reliability report. What is systems reliability? Supposedly nowadays, of course, it has become very common. All the bigger companies or even the smaller companies, they run on systems. They have their own, systems. Like in our at Being SSA, we have our own website. We have our own LMS system, and supposedly in some other company, they have their hardwares also, wherein on the hardwares they work. All of these systems in bigger factories, they have their own machinery, all of these things, right? So there can be malfunction. We have to check if these systems are working fine or no. That is a system reliability report, that if the system, if the hardware, if the LMS, if the website is working fine or no of the company. Because if the system goes away, if the system is not working fine, everything can go in vain. The company can just shut down because the systems are not well in place. It's not about the financial statements. Here we're not checking the balance sheet, the P&L, the trading, all of these things. We're not checking here. Here we're just checking if the system, if my physical system or my softwares are working fine or no. That is my system reliability report. Again, done by the practitioner. Fourth, verification of social and environmental information. Now, you and I, both we know that nowadays sustainability, social environmental causes, all of these have become very important for the company also, for us also. And government is actively promoting and actively looking out for the factories or the companies that does a lot of environmental damage, right? So again, if for example there are two types of company, there's company A, there's company B. Supposingly you get to know that company A is doing a lot of environmental damage. They're polluting the water, they're polluting the rivers, they're polluting the environment, the air, they're harming dogs, they're harming humans, they're harming dog skin, etc. All of these. So, and there's another company, who's company B, who's very environmental cautious, and they're not doing much of the environmental damage, and that has also been done in their reporting aspect. So of course you are somebody who is going to invest probably in B, or you're going to buy products from B, right? So every company, if you Google, you will be able to find that every company also have environmental reports now, wherein they tell that this was our carbon footprint, or this is how we saved the environment, this is what we did. And again, as public, how can I check, or how can I know that your finance, that the information जो आपने मुझे provide करी है, they are absolutely fine. Of course, there can be a situation wherein you're lying in the environmental information reports also. So these reports, which are social and environmental reports, these are also verified by the practitioner. So in those cases, they just verify if whatever you have told. If supposing you tell that I have an NGO, so they probably go and visit the NGO, they check the workings of the NGO, etc., the funds of the NGO, XYZ. So that is the verification of the social and environmental information. Fifth one is review of the internal control. So you people already know what are internal controls, I hope. So internal controls are basically put in by the company. For example, the company has a locker, right, in which they have kept their cash into it. So that is like an internal control that they have kept in place. The locker, the password, if it is a digital password or like a the thumbprint or something. So that is like an internal control that they have put in place so that the money does not get lost. So again, you as a practitioner, you can also check if the internal controls done by the company is absolutely good or no. Internal controls chapter, we have a very, very big chapter in the later part of the syllabus, so you will be able to better understand what are internal controls. But I've given you a small example to so that you at least understand here, right? So that is review in the internal controls. And then sixth one we have, sorry, sixth one, we have value for money. So value for money, you already know that there are three E's over here. In smaller classes, in smaller papers, we've already done what are three E's. Three E's means economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. These three are there. So again, your company should have value for money in public sector organization, which is basically publicly owned listed entities. They should serve value for money to their shareholders. So again, you can audit this also. Value for money can also get audited, right? So this is the basic. These are some of the examples of your assurance engagements. Now, one thing I want to say, let's do one thing. I hope that you've understood the examples. What we're going to do, this is, for now, let's suppose this is my category number one, first category, and all of these other, they fall into category number two. They fall into category number two. Let's bifurcate. Category one, category two. This will be useful when I explain in the next topic. All right. Now, first of all, let's understand now what is the audit and assurance. So now we got to know that assurance is a umbrella term. Audit is an example of assurance, right? So let's understand what is audit. A careful, independent check. So careful is assurance. Careful, independent is assurance also. Check to see if important information, usually a company's financial statement. So one thing you have to keep in mind is that audit is in 90% of the case scenarios, if there's no word attached to it, just audit, it is mostly for your financial statements, right? Is correct in all important ways. Who does it? Kaun karta hai? Who does the audit? Independent auditors from outside the organization. So supposing this being SSCA, I will hire somebody else. I will hire Deloitte to audit my financial statement. I cannot audit my own because, of course, if I audit my own, there's no purpose left, right? So that is the reason these big fours, these serve as a client. So if you're working in one of the big fours, you would know it better that these big fours, these have clients who get them self auditor. Like Reliance have the auditor, every big company has an auditor. So that is our big four, for example. So that is the independent auditors versus third party. They are not part of the company. They check. Of course, they're not part of the same company. Why do we actually need an audit? To give people, owners, banks, donors, government, which is basically the users, the intended users. This basically means intended. Now we can actually use these words because we know the meaning of these words. So why to use bank, donors? No, intended users. So to give people, which is intended users, high confidence that the numbers are reliable. They are correct, they are accurate. Similar to the example in our car mechanic, the car mechanic is giving us the assurance that yes, everything is fine for the car, you can purchase it. So that is why do an audit. Then what do auditors do? So what are the procedures? Some of the procedures, what do actually they do in the audit? They look at the records, they check the invoices, receipts, the bank statements, they test the samples. So if you people know that if you people are then in audit, or if you are not there in audit, let me tell you. So as an auditor, if it's like a big company, supposing Reliance has lakhs and lakhs of invoices every single week, I would say, or every single day also, I would say, right? And you as an auditor, your team cannot actually check one each and every invoice. Of course not. That's practically impossible, right? So what you do, you always work on sample basis. That if there are supposedly 1,000 invoices, we are going to check, we are going to review, we are going to see only 10 out of these 1,000 invoices. So they set a criteria for the sampling. So first of all, sampling happens and then you do your audit, right? So they will only do for 10. So that is what test samples of transactions, not every single one. So they only take samples of it. They don't check every single transaction, right? Ask questions. They ask the management, ask the employees, everybody ask questions, observe things, how they are going. As I mentioned that if you are the car mechanic, you will ask questions, how many kilometers you can also ask the, the showroom guy about the detailed technical things that probably I would not know as a customer, right? So that is ask questions. They can also observe that, okay, this is how the car is running, how the car is working, how they are managing the car. So you can also observe the same. Confirm key numbers with outsiders. So you can also confirm with other people. Supposedly you as a car mechanic, you reach out to the first customer whose car it was, the first ever buyer of the car. You can confirm how many kilometers has it run, and or how was the engine, how was the working, all of these things you can also confirm from the first ever customer. Check if the company follows the rules and accounting standards, given opinion at the end, which we have already discussed. So this is what the auditor actually does. Now let's move forward. What they can't do. So as an auditor, there are certain limitations which I probably cannot do. One is they don't check every single transaction, which I just said that they always work on sampling basis, right? Second thing, they don't guarantee no fraud at all. Of course, this is one thing, guys, you have to understand that if I take the car mechanic example, right? The mechanic checked everything, checked if the engines are fine, everything, right? But even after that, after for supposedly 1 month, there were certain issues with the car and the car was not functioning well. You cannot blame the mechanic that you told me that it is working fine and now this is a problem. Of course not. The whatever information, whatever basis, whatever evidences the car mechanic got, on that basis only he did the review, he did the checking. Probably there's some other fault within the car which he was not aware of. For example, he is not responsible for that. Similarly, the auditor never ever guarantees an absolute assurance. They never ever guarantee that there's no fraud at all, because of course there can be multiple different things that management has does which the auditor does not know about, for example. So never ever the auditor gives an absolute assurance over something. All right, they don't run the business or decide prices, salary. So they are not the ones who are deciding prices. They are not the one who are running the business. They are not the one who are making the financial statements. They are only reviewing. Like in the teacher example, the teacher, the tutor is not actually writing your answers down. You are the ones who's writing your answers down, right? So that is what they don't do. Now examples, some real life examples I've written. School fundraiser, an auditor checks the cash collected, receipt, bank balances, etc. Small shop, auditor compares sales records to bank deposits, check bills, inventory counts, etc. Charity, auditor checks the donations, spends on promised activities, the reports matches the receipts, etc. Apartment, hostel, community, etc. So I've given like real life examples. You can quickly read and you'll get all of the idea. Now, last things which you have to remember, audit is equals to deep. They are deep. As I mentioned, they are detailed independent check that gives a high confidence. It's reasonable assurance, not 100% guarantee. I will explain you reasonable, limited, and absolute assurance also. Auditors focus on what matters most, big or risky, using samples and evidences. So big or risky, they matter as per the sample basis, right? Now, I have again made a table over here. Probably this will also help you a lot in understanding the difference. All right, let me quickly go through it, then we'll move to the next topic. Simple meaning, a deep and detailed check to give high confidence. Lighter check, which is assurance. Basically review, I'm talking about the review engagements over here. Review engagements. All right. Confidence, high confidence, medium confidence. Depth of work, cost, lots of testing, lots of looking at the evidences, etc. Mainly questions and simple answers, etc. How the report sounds, in our opinion, the numbers are correct in all important ways. Nothing has come. Yeah, this one I will explain you in the next video. What is checked? Usually the full financial statements are checked. Here on a sample basis, you do a light check of the transactions, right? Time and cost, more time, higher cost, lesser time, lesser cost, for obvious reasons. Examples I have given, already explained to you over here. When to choose? You need high confidence for shareholders, lenders. You need lighter and faster check of the intent. You just need to check a quick review of it. Nothing major, right? One line memory, deep check of the higher confidence, lighter check with some little confidence, right? So this is the difference between your audit and assurance. I hope now it is clear, and I hope that you won't learn, or you will not roam around and not knowing the meaning of what is the difference between audit and assurance. Okay, now let's start. In the next video, we'll start the different types of assurance engagements. All right. All right, guys, let's start with the next topic, which is types of assurance engagement. So in previous video, I told you to bifurcate these examples into two categories, right? I told you that the audit engagement will fall into one category, and the next one, which is these all, rest of the whatever other categories are there, that will fall into the second category. That was purposeful. Why? Okay, so there are two types of assurance engagements. These were the examples of assurance engagements, right? See, these are not types of assurance engagements. I'm just giving you the examples. We have to bifurcate these examples into different types, two different types, all right? The first type is reasonable assurance. Reasonable assurance. I hope you understand the meaning of reasonable assurance. And then the next one is limited assurance. So reasonable basically means that I am going to do a reasonable test or reasonable checking or reasonable analysis to obtain sufficient appropriate evidences, right? It can be a little detailed, but it's not absolute. So there are three terminologies that we always refer to. One is absolute. One is reasonable, which I just told you. And one is limited. So let's understand first the difference between these three. Absolute basically means, as an auditor, I say that 100% of whatever is there, whatever financial statements are there, they're absolutely free of any fraud and error. Absolutely. There's not a tiny bit of error or fraud is there in the financial statements. Now, this kind of assurance does not ever happen. No auditor in real life, guys, I'm talking about real life only, all right? In real life also, nobody says that it is not even the big fours. They never ever say this to a client. If you are one of the people who are working in big four, you would know it, because I am working, I know it. And here we do not ever say that everything is working fine. We say that we have done these testing, we have gotten these evidences, we have tested these controls and checks, and as per us, everything looks fine to me, or everything does not look fine to me, whatever is your opinion, right? So you do not never ever say that 100% I can give you guarantee, you can change my name if something goes wrong or something. Nothing happens. So absolute never happens. It is only reasonable or limited. Reasonable means reasonably I have checked at the sampling also, I've done the sampling, I've tested the details also, I have performed thorough procedures and tests and controls, all of these things. And once I did all of these, then I concluded this conclusion, whether everything is okay, whether everything is not okay in the financial statements. Limited is again a smaller version of it, which says that I have only reviewed, I have only done 10% of the review of it, and as per me, nothing is wrong in the financial statements. That is what you say. So there is a difference, and never ever we get the absolute assurance, right? Okay, so let's do the reasonable assurance. So reasonable assurance, in here, the practitioner, he gathers sufficient appropriate evidence, which we have already discussed, to be able to draw a reasonable conclusion. Reasonable conclusion, performs very thorough procedures, as we discussed, to check the controls and checks, all of these thorough procedures, concludes that the subject matters conforms in all material respects with identified suitable criteria. That means that this is part of the definition that I told you for the assurance. Concludes the subject matter conforms in all material respects with the identified suitable criteria. That means that my blood reports, as per the criteria, are okay. So my financial statements, whatever, supposing they have done the treatment for provisions. So if I compare the treatment for the provision that they have done as compared to the IS 37 provisions, it is absolutely okay. So I have compared it with the suitable criteria, and in my opinion, it is okay. gives positively worded assurance opinion. So here you have to remember this thing, that in reasonable assurance you will only and only get a positively worded opinion. You will say that everything as per me is okay, is everything is fine, no worry, no need to worry about anything. All right, so that is a positively worded opinion, right? Gives high level of assurance, confidence. So you give a confidence to the user that everything looks fine to me, but again it is embedded that nothing, that it is not 100% true. All right, similar to your tutor also, she checked your answers, but ho sakta hai in the exam you get something else. So that's not a complete assurance that you're ready for the boards, you're ready for the exams, right? And in our opinion, the financial statements give true and fair view. This is usually your opinion. This is usually your opinion in the audit opinion that you give in the reasonable assurance, right? All right. And then I told you that you have to bifurcate this one. So the first category, which is the audit is the only, when you do the audit of financial statements, that's the only example, only type of your reasonable assurance. So the only example, only type is audit of financial statement. This is your stat audit. The statutory audit that you do in real life, that is the example of reasonable assurance. All right, so it is a type of assurance. It's not the same. All right. Then the next one, all of these other things, whatever we do apart from audit, that all falls under limited assurance. Because here, as I told you, as I explained to you, what is the meaning of review, what is the meaning of this, all of these I have already explained to you. So you would know that here we are not doing very detailed practice, right? We're just reviewing it. We're just checking from above. We're not doing detailed procedures, detailed analysis, all of those things we're not doing. We are doing that in the audit, right? So if you go to the limited assurance, the practitioners gather sufficient appropriate evidence to be able to draw a limited conclusion. So he does not do an reasonable conclusion. Here he was doing a reasonable conclusion, right? So the evidencing, the procedures, they're all limited. They're all smaller in size. Perform significantly fewer procedures. So if in the audit you're performing 100 procedures, here you're only going to perform 20, 30 procedures. That's all, right? Mainly inquires and inquires and analytical procedures. So he inquires from the management, inquires if everything is going fine, inquires why this procedure has been followed, etc. And management is liable to answer them, right? And performs the analytical procedures. Analytical procedures is basically checking if the ratios, checking with the trends, analysis, all of those things, little bit, right? Concludes the subject matter with respect to identify suitable. So this is again the same thing, that concludes the subject matter with respect to identified suitable criteria, is plausible in the circumstances, right? Gives a negatively worded assurance conclusion. So here the auditor does not say that everything looks fine to me. Like here they say everything looks fine to me, but here in the limited assurance they say nothing has come to our attention that causes us to believe that the financial statements are not working fine, for example, right? So nothing, you give a negatively word, nothing has come to our attention, but there can be something else. So hamare attention mein kuch nahi aaya, but there can be something else, right? That is, gives a moderate or lower level of assurance than the audit. So that if you're comparing audit, it is higher, and then limited is lower or medium level, right? The confidence is inspired by reasonable assurance, is designed to be greater. Of course, it is greater than your limited assurance. Whatever confidence that you get in the reasonable assurance, you get lower over here, because here we are doing lesser procedures. So where I explained to you this particular table, here I said that how the report sounds in the audit, in the reasonable assurance, it gets to, in our opinion, the positive opinion, in our opinion, the numbers are correct in all important ways. Whereas in the negative one, in the absolute, in the review in assurance, when you're doing limited assurance, when you're doing, you say nothing has come to our attention, which is negatively worded, right? All right. So these are the two types of limited of assurances, and then you have the examples. So only and only audit is the sole external audit, stat audit, whatever you want to call it. That is the sole example of assurance engagement. Rest everything comes into the reasonable. It comes under the limited assurance, right? Now let's move forward with the next topic, which is our objectives. Now this is a very small topic. It is part of your study text. That is the reason I'm covering it. So the objectives of the auditor is to obtain reasonable assurance about the financial statements for obvious reasons and express an opinion, whether bad, whether good, whatever opinion they have to express it, right? Okay. Next topic, benefits. So of course, when we are doing certain activity, we're spending money, we're spending time, there will be certain benefits of that particular activity. So what is the benefit? Higher quality information, which is more reliable, because of course a third party has reviewed that particular item, so it will be more reliable for obvious reasons. Independent scrutiny and verification may be valuable to management. For management also, it becomes a little valuable because they also know that, okay, this is where we are going wrong. Okay, this is what is working better for us. So in those cases, they also get better clarity of their own workings, right? Reduces the risk of frauds and errors. This we have already discussed. Enhances the credibility of the financial statements for the intended users. They feel it more credible if they, even for the general public. If you see an auditor report of a particular company, you will feel more confident that, okay, somebody has reviewed it, somebody has signed it, because they're all professionals. They all have so much of experience in every single thing, right? So that is that. And it also helps to identify any deficiencies which is there in the internal controls system. So this is basically your internal control systems. Perfect. Okay. Next topic is expectation gap. Expectation gap is basically, so supposedly you as a responsible party, you assume, or probably as an intended user also, you assume that auditor will probably will do all of the things that actually auditor does not have to do. For example, I know thoda sa confusing ho gaya, but let's take an example. You know that auditor does not make financial statements. I just now above told you that auditor is not responsible for making the financial statements. They're only responsible for reviewing or scrutinizing the financial statements. Similarly, your teacher is not responsible to write your answer scripts, to write your tests, to write your mocks, all right? You are responsible for it. But supposedly the users or the shareholders, they feel that auditor will actually make the financial statements also, which is not what they do. That is the expectation gap. What is expected out of them probably is not their own responsibility. Probably is not the responsibility of the auditor. Some users incorrectly believe that an audit provides absolute assurance. This is also what I told, कि never ever they provide. This is the one example that they never ever provide 100% assurance, which is absolute assurance. So probably some users might feel that why is he not providing me absolute assurance? But in actual terms, in professional world, auditor never ever provides that the audit opinion is a guarantee that the financial statements are correct. This and other misconceptions. So all of the misconceptions that they have for the auditor, that is known as the expectation gap. About the role of the auditor is referred to as expectation gap. Examples, believe that auditor tests all the transactions. As I told you, they test on sample basis, which is not what they do. Believe that auditor are required to detect all fraud, which is again this one, absolute assurance, which is not what they do. Believe that auditor are responsible for preparing the financial statements, again not what they do. So this is what is known as expectations gap. All right, and this, mind you guys, this topic can come for like a 3 marker as your knowledge based question in your section B. All right, so you need to know this. This is a very, very easy topic and can come as a 3 marker where you have to tell what is expectation gap, and you have to also tell about the examples just to make it more a 3 marker answer, right? Now, last thing that we are going to talk about, we have already talked about review engagement. So this is, we already know that review engagement is an example of limited assurance, right? Last topic that I want to talk about is stakeholder groups with interest in the financial statement. So we have already studied this, but again, this was part of your syllabus, so I wanted to cover this. So stakeholder groups, who are all the people who have interest in the financial statements and probably can also be your intended users of the audit report. So shareholders, of course, employees, they also need to know what is the position of the company, how are they working, are we getting bonuses, etc. Those charged with governance, customers, suppliers, lenders, the government, these are all the stakeholders who are there, right? So I hope that you have already learned about this in the previous classes, but just wanted to brief you up. So I hope now the chapter 1 is absolutely clear to you. We're also going to solve the TYUs from the Kaplan study text. We're also going to solve the Kaplan study kit. We are also going to do that. And live, we are going to solve BPP and Study Hub. So I hope you people are clear with this. If you have any doubts, any questions in regards to chapter number 1, please feel free to reach out to me on WhatsApp. I'll be more than happy to help you out with that, and see you in chapter number 2. Okay, guys, let's start with the test your understanding questions from your Kaplan study text. So these are some, like, they won't be too much, but I think that, although they are very easy and some of the tutors do not do it, but I feel that, if we do these basics also, if you do these basic questions, once you're done with the studying of the study text, you will be able to better understand the topics which you have just learned. It will be like a quick recap of all of the topics that we just now did, right? So let's start with the first test your understanding. I will also be providing you the draft answers which I have made. It will be uploaded on the portal itself. So the first question says, list and explain the elements of assurance engagement, which is a 5 marker. I told you people that this portion, which is elements of assurance engagement, can come for 5 marker in your knowledge based questions in your section B, right? So this is like an example of that particular question that can come as a knowledge based question. So keep making your notes simultaneously, right? And see, again, guys, there's one more thing which I want to add is, a lot of times when we are answering questions, we do not read the question carefully. We only read that, okay, it is asking the elements, let's write the elements of it. But it is saying list. So list basically means you just need to number it down. You don't have to explain it. But it is saying list and explain. That means you have to also explain the elements of the assurance engagement. You cannot just list them down. And that is the reason it is a 5 marker. If they only would have asked you regarding the listing portion, they would only have probably given a 2 marker or maximum a 3 marker, not more than that. But they gave a 5 marker because we know that there are 5 elements in the assurance engagement, right? So let's start by revising this particular topic. So we all know that there is a 3-party engagement. We know that the first element is a 3-party involvement. There are 3 parties. There is I'll show you the answer also. I have written it down for you. Yeah. So there's your auditor, which is basically a practitioner. Then there are the intended users, which is basically your shareholders, basically the general public also, who has invested their money if it is a public listed company, right? And then the responsible party, who has basically made the financial statements or any other reports that they want to get the audited of, right? That's the first thing. So you have 3-party involvement. Then next one is appropriate subject matter. So see here, this is the screenshot from the notes only, which I just explained in the lecture, right? So here it is just a listing. This is only a list. This is not an explanation. Nowhere there is an explanation. But down, if you see, I have also written the explanation for the same. So intended user, the person who requires the assurance report, who is basically a public or the users or the shareholders. Then the responsible party, the person or organization who is responsible for preparing the subject matter, with basically your directors, right, or management. Then the practitioner is basically the accountant or the auditor, the professional who will review the subject matter, basically your teacher in the example that I gave to you. The tutor is the practitioner in this particular regards, right? The second one is a suitable subject matter. So this is the information that the responsible party has prepared, which is basically your financial statements or any other reports. If they're doing it for assurance also, limited assurance if they're doing it for, then in cases of that, they will be having other types of reports, sustainability, verification, all of those, they have separate reports. But yeah, basically the subject matter on which we actually have to check or review or verify or analyze, the practitioner who will use these reports, right? Then the next one is a suitable criteria. So suitable criteria is against which you check the report, which is basically your financial reporting standards, financial reporting framework, IFRS. So you check and compare that if these two are matching or no. So that's your suitable criteria. Then next one is sufficient appropriate evidence. I explained to you the meaning of sufficient. I explained to you the meaning of appropriate. Sufficient is quantitative, appropriate is qualitative. The information, the evidence that you're getting, they should be qualitative as well as quantitative. So that is what I have written over here. And then the last one is your assurance report. Basically, like your school card report, this is again a report which has the conclusion of the auditor, that the auditor says that yes, everything is looks fine to me, there's no problem as such. But when the auditor says no, there is some problem, that is when we also refer to this assurance report. So these are the 5 major elements. So we not only have to list them, we also have to explain them so that we get full 5 marks. And mind you guys, this is the easiest knowledge based question that you can get in your exam. If this question comes, it is like a lottery to you. All right, let's move to the next question now, which is your testing your understanding 2. Explain the term limited assurance. So we all know that there are 2 types of assurances. One is reasonable assurance, one is limited assurance. They're asking about the limited assurance, wherein we gather only limited information and we have a negative connotation, conclusion, all of those things, right? In the context of an examination of a company's cash flow forecast. So now they have actually, see guys, this is not really a knowledge based question if you see, because they have given us a case study, case scenario, basically not a study of course, but like a scenario that we have to compare the limited assurance report that we just studied to a company's cash flow forecast. So I hope that you people know the difference between the cash flows which are actually prepared and the forecast. Forecast is just an assumption of the future. It says that okay, in the future we are going to have these many financing items, these many investing items, this much of cash will be there, these many inflows, these many outflows. So those are only forecasts, those are only assumptions. That's not a reality, right? So I hope that you people already know this, because this is a very smaller classes concept. So they are asking us that if the company has provided us with a forecast, so it's not a cash flow statement as such, but it is a forecast of the cash flows. You need to first explain the limited assurance, what it is, and then we are going to compare that if, for example, the company gives us a forecast of cash flows, how are we going to give our assurance on that particular forecast, and explain how this differs from the assurance provided by the external. So external audit will provide reasonable assurance, right? So the context of reasonable assurance will be different from the limited assurance in same case, right? So I have again drafted the answer. So again, this is a 5 marker. Make sure that you are writing as per 5 marks only. All right. Okay. Let's move with the answer. All right. So as I told you that you first have to talk about that what is a limited assurance. So we all know that it is a lighter form of the assurance, wherein for forward-looking cash flow forecast, wherein we are doing limited review of everything. We're not doing any detailed analysis, detailed review. We're not doing that. We're doing surface level testing, etc. The auditor only uses limited procedures, mostly questions, discussions, simple checks. So simple, only surface level checks they do to see if everything obvious looks wrong. So if anything obviously looks wrong to me, so that is what they're going to see. The conclusion is obviously negative. We all know that nothing has come to our attention. Important, this is not a guarantee. Of course, nothing. Even not the reasonable assurance is also not a guarantee. Similarly, limited is of course not a guarantee. And specifically in this case, why it is not a guarantee? Because it is a forecast. Forecasts are uncertain because they depend on the future events and the assumptions. So they are not certain because it is an assumption only, as I told you before, right? So what doesn't it do? It does not test every number in the forecast like a full audit. So we are comparing now. We're comparing the limited assurance to the external audit, which the question asked us. So we do not test every number in the forecast. It does not guarantee that the forecast will happen. We're not guaranteeing anything. We're just, whatever information that the client has given to us, we are just checking if that information is fine or no. That's all that we are doing, right? So I have also written a simple example. Probably you will be able to better understand with this. Let's see. You don't have to write this lengthy example, lengthy answer. I have written this simple example just to explain to you. You can skip this in your actual answer, right? A company makes 12 months forecast, cash flow forecast using assumptions like, so these are the assumptions that they have used to make their cash flow. One is sales growth will increase each month, 5% each month it will increase. Customer payments will come in 30 days, which is too optimistic. Customers never pay, especially in like a product-based business, customers never pay in 30 days. Either it is a 60-day cycle or a 90-day cycle, or even sometimes it is 120 days cycle. Monthly rent and salaries are fixed, so monthly rent and salaries can be fixed. Looks okay to me, but these two are too optimistic, because sometimes it can be sales growth can be lesser, sometimes it can be more also, and constant growth of 5% every month seems too optimistic to me, right? The auditor performs limit assurance. They ask management about the big assumptions, growth, payment terms, which is a big thing, right? Because right now these look too optimistic to me. So these are very big assumptions that they are making. So we'll just ask them what is the basis, etc. They check a key input, a major customer contract, big payment item. So we'll just quickly check. They compare the forecast to the previous years, and then they are going to conclude we did not find anything major wrong based on a limit assurance. So again, a negative conclusion will be provided. How it is different from the external audit? So I've written that. You can also write this in like a tabular form if you want, but I have written like this because I wanted to bifurcate it better. If you want, I can also provide you the table for this one. So focus, limit assurance, always forward looking, not past. External checks the historical. So see, when we are talking about the limited assurance, our focus is only about the information that has been provided to us right now. We don't look at the previous ones, or we don't look at the forward ones, or whatever. But when we are doing external audit, which is basically we're obtaining a reasonable assurance, we look 360 degree. We see what happened previously, what is happening now, what are the forecasting for the future. So we look at everything. But when we are doing limited assurance, we do not look at every single thing. We are just very forward looking. We do not look any of the past numbers, basically, right? Level of assurance, limited assurance, lower, higher, we already know this. Evidence and testing uses inquiries, basic analytics. It happens detailed over here. We already know this, we've already done this. Then we have reporting language. It always say we provide negative conclusion. Here we have a positively worded conclusion. And then what is the purpose of? So it helps users gain confidence and gives strong confidence about the accuracy of the historical financial statements. Right? So how are you going to write this particular answer is you're going to first talk about what is limited assurance, a quick definition of limited assurance. Then you're going to talk about that, what it does not do, or whatever basically it includes. And then in regards to your cash flow statement, because the question is specifically asking for company's cash flow forecast. So that is what we are going to talk about over here. Then you're going to compare with the external audit. So these were the three portions that you needed to cover over here, which is basically the definition of the limited assurance and in assurance one, second in context of the company's cash flows, and third comparing with the external audit. That is when you're going to get full 5 marks. All right. Although these types of questions are hardly asked, but again, it is always better to perform every single question so that we know that we have prepared to the best of our capacity, right? Okay, now test your understanding 3. Let's read. This is a little case study question. So it will give you a very good practice of the OTQs that usually come into your section A. Although these sets of OTQs usually don't come, these are very simple. But when you start with, level 1, then you go to level 2, level 3, that is only, the graph then increase, and then you won't find level 3 questions difficult when you are able to answer question level 1. Because right now, if you answer these questions really well, then you will get that confidence that yes, I have understood the topic really well. That is the sole reason I am doing test your understandings also with you people, right? So you can pause the video, you can read the case study, or probably you can read the case study with me, and then the questions you can answer on your own, right? Take a pen and paper, or just open a Word document and write your answers over there, and then see what my answers are, and then see how many options you were able to select, find like the correct options, right? Okay, your firm has been approached to perform the external. So first of all, our first word we have gotten that it is external audit. That means we're going to have reasonable assurance. We're not going to have any limited assurance. Everything that we're going to do is going to be very deep dived, right? Of Perth Company. So our client name is Perth Company. Perth Company has grown over the last 2 years and has now reached the audit threshold. So we all know that if it is a small company, we don't usually audit it. But when it is a larger company, it has to get itself audited. As this is the first year the company has required an audit, the directors are unsure about the purpose of the audit. So probably they don't know what is audit. Probably they don't know the responsibilities, roles and responsibilities of the auditor. So they might have an expectation gap because they don't know. That is where the expectation gaps concept come in, right? Because the management is thinking something else, but auditor does something else only, right? So unsure about the purpose of the audit, they have been informed that an audit need not be as inconvenient or intrusive as they expect it to be, as there are additional benefits that may arise from having an audit. So they are thinking that it won't be intrusive, but it will be intrusive because the auditor is going to question them, right? So this is a wrong assumption probably of them. The directors have indicated that they expect your firm to detect every fraud and error. Big red flag. Again, you do not do. This is a red flag, right? You do not detect every fraud and error. You will be able to detect fraud and error, but not every, right? This is not an absolute assurance. This is a reasonable assurance in the accounting records, so that when they need to apply for finance to help them grow further, they can use the audited financial statements to support the loan application, and this should make it easier to obtain the loan. That is fine. They can of course use the statements to obtain a loan or something, but they cannot expect the auditor firstly to not be intrusive, secondly to detect every fraud and errors, right? So you have read the case study. Now let's go to question number 1. Pause the video, read the question, answer it for you, then listen to what my answer would be. All right. The level of assurance will be provided by the independent. What level of assurance will be provided by the independent auditor's report? As this though I've answered above only, I've written over here because it is an external audit, it would be reasonable assurance. So this would, the answer is reasonable, right? Next question. Now read this question, pause the video, answer for yourself, then see my answer, right? To see if you are actually able to answer these questions or no. Which of the following is not? Guys, please make sure that you are reading the questions very carefully, because sometimes we skip on these words which is not, and the question completely changes, the meaning completely changes for the question, right? Here they're saying which of the following is not one of the 5 elements of the assurance engagement. So all of these would be 5 the elements of the engagement, the 5 elements that we have which we just not revised, but one of them would not be. So let's see. Subject matter, of course it is, you have your financial statements. If you do not have your financial statements, what are you going to see, right? So subject matter of course is suitable criteria. Of course you match it with the suitable criteria, you match it with the standards, IFRS, etc. So that is again assurance file, written report. So written report is also the 5th element of it, wherein finally we have a conclusion by the auditor. So assurance file is not part of your 5 elements of the engagement, because we don't have an assurance file, we have a final written report, right? Okay, next one. Which of the following, again, not, it's asking not a benefit of audit. So all of 4 would be benefit of the audit. One of it probably is not the benefit, or probably is a limitation of audit. Can be anything. Okay, increased credibility of the financial statements. Of course, this is a very big advantage, because once somebody, external party, has actually reviewed your financial statements, your credibility increases in the eyes of the public, in the eyes of the lenders, the government, the shareholders, all of these people. So this is not the answer, because this is a benefit of the audit. Deficiencies and controls may be identified during testing. Again, this is one of the benefits which, when we were studying, I told you specifically. If you go back to your notes also, you'll be able to see the deficiencies in the internal control. So because I am also checking the processes, how the company is working, I also give you people the example of passwords, right? So this is again a benefit of the audit, that the auditor might be able to identify any kind of deficiencies in the internal control processes of the company. So this is again a benefit. So it's not the correct answer. Fraud may be detected during the fraud. Yes, this is right. If they would have written all fraud, then that would not be a correct answer. But of course, we do detect the fraud. So again, students, you might be confused that here it is specifically mentioned that every. So is it like every here also, or is it not? Like, is it every here also, or is it not? it is not, because they have not written all, they have not written every. If they would have written, it would be a correct answer. But right now, because you as an auditor, your duty is to detect the fraud and error, but not every, not all, right? So this is the correct answer. Like, this is the benefit of the audit. Sampling is used. So sampling, as you people know, is like a negative thing, because sometimes the sampling might not be done correctly. Sometimes the sample has been wrongly selected. So in those cases, it does become a negative thing or a limitation actually for the auditor in the audit. So it's not a benefit, it's a limitation. So that is the reason. Fourth one, which is D, is the correct answer, right? Okay, next one. Which of the following statement is false? So we have to identify which is the false. Out of these four, three would be true, one would be a false statement. The auditor will express an opinion as to whether the financial statements give a true and fair view. Of course, this is the duty of the auditor. Second, the auditor must obtain sufficient appropriate evidence to be able to form an audit opinion. Of course, we have just done this, that this is one of the elements of your assurance engagement. So this is absolutely correct. If the financial statements are found to contain certain material misstatement, a negative audit opinion will be given. Of course, if the see, again, read the question really well. I also got confused. See here, if they say if the financial statements are found to contain material misstatement, that means that your financial statements is not correctly made. There are some issues in the financial statement. There are some things going wrong in the financial statements, correct? So they are saying a negative audit opinion will be given. Absolutely not. You won't be giving any negative opinion. You'll be giving a modified, or you'll be just having a conclusion that, hey, listen, something is going wrong. In negative audit opinion, we say nothing has come to our attention. That is a negative audit opinion in limited assurance, right? If you revise this topic again, you would get to know. Let me again reiterate. In limited assurance, when we provide, we always have a negative audit opinion. What is the negative audit opinion? Is that nothing has come to our attention. That is our negatively worded. Nothing has come to our attention. Right? This is what is there in the negative audit opinion, right? But if the financial statements are found to be materially misstated, of course, we won't be saying that nothing has come to our attention. There has been certain things that has come to our attention. So that will be a report. We will have a conclusion separately for that, right? So this is actually a false statement as per me. Let's read. The auditor may not detect all fraud and error in the this I just discussed with you people, that this is absolutely correct, because I might not be able to detect all of them. I will be able to detect some of them, but not all, not every, right? We just discussed this, right? So again, guys, you can follow one more approach, which is known as elimination method. I am not sure if you have used this method in other exams of yours or no, but elimination is also a very good technique of answering the OTQ questions. Because if you see over here, even if by mistake, like I've also got confused when I first read, but of course it was not the case scenario. So you can read all of them and see, okay, ye to nahi hoga, this won't be there, this won't be there, so this will be there, and then understand why this is there. When you're practicing, understand why. For every little scenario, see, यहाँ पे when we are reading the questions, I'm explaining you कि ये क्यों होगा या ये क्यों नहीं होगा. I'm telling you that, right? कि why this will be there or why this will not be there. I'm not straight away jumping to the answers, because until and unless you understand all of these 4 pointers, there's no point in doing the OTQs. You have to understand all of the 4 answers really well, right? Last one. Fifth one, which of the following are examples of expectation gap? So we already know what is expectation gap. Is when management assume some responsibilities of the auditor which actually are not the responsibilities of the auditor, right? Okay, the independent auditor's report confirms the financial statements are accurate. This is example. This is a very, very, very big example of your expectation gap, because you cannot say it is 100% accurate. You cannot give an absolute assurance. You have to give a reasonable assurance. An unmodified report means the company is a going concern. This is, guys, this thing you actually will be able to get when we are in the last portion of the syllabus. Right now, you might not be able to understand what is unmodified opinion, and that is okay. Let me just quickly tell you. So basically, when I told you that auditors have a report, right? And in the report, see, let's compare your report to a school card report. In what your report can contain, one is a bad behavior of yours, one can be a good behavior of yours. So if it is a good behavior, everything is okay. But if it is a bad behavior, you're going to state what is bad, what is happening, etc. Similarly, when the auditor will be having a report, when they make a report, they are going to give a modified opinion, which is basically a bad opinion. Modified basically means that I have modified का मतलब क्या होता है? Changes. Modified means changes. So modified report basically means, modified opinion basically means that you need to do some changes because there are problems in your financial statements. Think of it like that, right? And good would be unmodified. Right? So unmodified means everything is okay. You don't need to modify anything in the financial statements. Everything is perfect. No changes needed. So that is what they're saying. An unmodified opinion means a company is a going concern. Going concern basically means that there can be problems. You people already have done, F3, FI. You already know what is going concern. So that is the reason this is again an example of expectation gap, because the unmodified report does not mean that the company is a going concern. It does not mean that, right? Third one, the auditor tests all transactions. Of course not. It is always on sample basis, never all transactions. So this is also correct. Example of expectation gap. Fourth, the auditor can be sued for negligence if they issue an inappropriate behavior. Absolutely correct. This is not an expectation gap example. This is a correct statement. Why? Because I know that some of you might think that this is again, auditor cannot be sued, etc. But no. Sometimes if the auditor has not done a qualitative work and the company thinks that the auditor has not done a qualitative work, then they can actually sue them because there was a negligence on the part of the auditor. Right? That is the reason we say that auditor has to maintain due care, all of those ethical threats, ethical principles that we're going to study in the next chapter that you're going to follow. But yes, auditor can be sued in case they do any negligence. So this is your correct. This is not example of expectation gap. So 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, the first one. Okay, so I think we are done. I don't think so. There are more questions. Yes. So we are done with our chapter number 1. We are done with the TYUs as well. And we are going to do the Kaplan text questions, BPP text questions, and Study Hub questions live in the live sessions. And yeah, that's that. And do let me know if you have any doubts, any questions in chapter number 1.